If you love orcas, this is the episode for you because we're going to talk about a slew of news that has come out about orcas, including the potential of two species, not one species of orca, but two species of orca that's being considered. We're also going to be talking about the death of a orca at Marineland in France, and we're also going to be talking about a very interesting and delicate rescue that has happened after a mother orca has passed away off the coast of Vancouver Island in a little lagoon. We're going to talk about all of this on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. So it's time to get your orca fill. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a ton of orca news, and orcas weigh a ton, so this makes sense. Ha ha ha. Just kidding. We always talk about news on this episode. If you've never really come to this podcast, or this is your first time here, welcome. We talk about the news, we talk about science communication, and we talk about what you can do to live for a better ocean, and I think that's one of the things that makes us special. It makes us different from everything. But also, we also are just a hub. I like to try and be a hub for news, so if you want to join us and learning about more news, we put out a newsletter every weekday, Monday to Friday, that is all about news, and it has job posts. So if you're looking to get a career in jobs, just hit us up at speakupforblue.com/newsletter and put in your email. So it's speakupforblue.com/newsletter, and just go to that website, put your email in, you'll get a response, and then you'll get some news every day in your inbox, and so you'll be up to date with the great news. Some people that like the newsletter have told me that they enjoy it because they get news that hasn't really broken yet in their sort of algorithms of social media or wherever they get their news, and so they're really happy to see the news before it gets to them. So that's always a bonus. So speakupforblue.com/newsletter. Now let's get into ocean news. We're going to be talking about orcas. The first thing we're going to be talking about, just briefly, because it's been around the news for quite some time, for the last few weeks, and that is the identification or sort of the proposal of two orca species. And we know that, we have orca ecotypes, right? We have on the west coast of Canada and the US, of North America, we have the southern resident orca population, the northern resident orca population, and we also have the transient orca population, which is known as some of them are Biggs orcas. Now, there's a difference in these ecotypes, and they've been separated for quite some time. The difference is sometimes a little bit in size, but really it's really in the fact that the resident populations only eat fish. They tend to travel in bigger pods. And the transients will eat marine mammals, most likely. They won't eat fish as much, but they will eat marine mammals, and they travel in smaller pods. They've also known that these, although sometimes these pods have interacted although some of these pods have sort of crossed over in terms of space, they haven't interacted in terms of reproduction for a very, 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 very long time. And so now they're thinking that, they've done some genetic tests and saying, hey, you know what? These species are actually quite different from each other, or these two pods are quite different from each other. And we need to find out if we need to propose that they actually be treated as two separate species. So that's what's in the proposal. There's a news journal article, and that journal article is proposing those two different species. And so they're going to propose those species, and they're going to find out, what's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to actually be taken up. There's a process to go through it. I don't know the full process, but I know it does take a while. So we'll keep you updated. But it's kind of cool to see that these are two very different populations, especially genetically, especially with one known that's an offshore type, oceanic type of pod as well, which is very similar to the transients, but they are thought to stay out in deeper water. We don't know if they interact with the Biggs transient whales, but we do know that a lot of them have cookie cutter marks on them, cookie cutter shark marks on them, which are known to be in deeper oceans. And the transient whale population are not in there. The transient orca population do not have those cookie cutter shark bites on them. So they're thinking, hey, you know what? This is more evidence that these might be separated. Now it's just a matter of finding genetic material. Even though there's some research that done, it's not a new discovery of this oceanic population, just that this cookie cutter shark bites are making it seem like they're a little bit more separated than what we initially thought. And then now it's a matter of getting genetic material, comparing it to the others, and seeing if these species or these two populations actually interact or overlap. And so we're going to find out more about that with research to come out soon, hopefully, and we'll get more answers on that. But that could be a new species. I mean, you look at all the populations. There's a population in northern Mexico on the Pacific side. We'll see if that is a specific population that's different from, the transient population up north, as well as the resident populations, the north and south resident populations. And then, of course, there's the population that's very popular. It's taking down boats, apparently. That's near the Strait of Gibraltar in the Atlantic. Are they different from other Atlantic orca populations? We're going to find out, I'm sure, at some point, and find out if those should be different species, because they're geographically separated, and maybe if they don't interact or they don't overlap or they don't reproduce together, they will be genetically different, and maybe that is evidence enough to be a separate species, not just population. So we're going to find out more about that, I'm sure, in the next couple of years, and we'll find out if the species actually get two different species. I think that will be sort of the introduction to a lot of studies that look at what these species are going to be. Even though they look very, very much alike, these are going to be different species in down the road. So that'll be interesting notes. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about orcas, we always have to talk, or not always, but we tend to talk about orcas in captivity. That is a big issue. There was an orca I believe its name was Inuk, I think. It was in a Marineland in a place in France. I don't remember the name of it. But it was there. Unfortunately, it died. There were two other orcas that are in those tanks. They were set to be released. There's talks about them to be released into the whale seaside sanctuary that is located off the coast of Nova Scotia. However, the whale seaside sanctuary off the coast of Nova Scotia is still being demarcated and still being approved. I think they just went through, last time I saw the Whale Sanctuary Project put out a post, they've gone through their third environmental assessment. This takes a long time for the government to approve. It always is going to take a long time. This is the first of its kind to actually put out or try to put out orca individuals that have been in captivity for a very long time. We don't know the ramifications. We don't know the consequences. We don't know the upside to it at this point, other than it's better than living in tanks. But of course, the government of Canada, to give that permission, is going to take a long time to do. So hopefully that will continue, and we'll see these orcas released to their care at some point in time soon, rather than later, before they can become susceptible to death. So just a quick update there. Obviously, it's a tragedy to see a Nook pass away, but there are two other orcas that should be released, and hopefully as soon as possible. Now let's get into sort of the latest story that's been making headlines in Canada and probably the North Pacific, I'm sure. The Washington Post released an article that is talking about a very interesting and tragic story of a mother and its calf orca. That now these are transient orcas that went into a scenic lagoon off the coast of Vancouver Island. They think the mother was chasing some seals that are trying to get away, and they went into this lagoon, got stuck in the lagoon at low tide. The mother was stuck and on her side when she was discovered. A number of different marine mammal experts, drone technicians, veterinarians, environmental consultants, and Indigenous people are scrambling to reunite, or were scrambling to help this orca. She eventually drowned. She was on her side, and the tide came in, and she couldn't breathe. Unfortunately, she drowned. But the calf is still alive and is still in the lagoon. However, the calf by itself out in the ocean will not survive. What the animal experts are hoping is that her extended family, grandmother, aunts, and so forth, will be around soon to be able to reunite the calf with the family. The only problem is this poor calf orca can't get out of the lagoon. There's a narrow area that allows for passage in and out. but I don't think this calf is confident to go out, or I don't think animal experts or the crew are confident for it to go out because it hasn't left yet. It stayed around. It was very, very sad. There was a sound that was played, the calf trying to find its mother as the mother was dying or as the mother just died. And it's very, very tragic, very sad to see a calf sort of orphaned like that. The mother was pregnant. And so that obviously makes it even more tragic, especially with, orcas. You just want them to reproduce in peace. But unfortunately, Mother Nature does this sometimes. This is not from anything human made. This just seems to be that an orca just got beached while trying to chase some seals or sea lions. And this calf is kind of on its own. So the couple of things that they're trying to do, they're trying to get the calf out before the family comes around. And what they want to do in that respect is they want to make sure that the calf can be available at any point in time when these transient killer whales or orcas come by, and they're trying to hear. So the first thing they try to do is entice the animal to get out of the lagoon by playing sounds of what they think the family sounds like. So they're trying to play it outside of the lagoon, entice the calf to say, hey, I'm going to come out there. I hear my family, my grandmother's out there, my aunt's out there, and maybe they're calling me, so I'm going to go out there. But that didn't work. That was sort of the best case scenario if it actually worked. Now the more of last ditch efforts, there was a plan at the beginning of actually taking a helicopter, trying to lift the calf out of the water and bring it back in outside of the lagoon. But that seems to be not as a priority as other methods. The other method is actually to crane it out, put it on a truck, bring it over to the other side of the lagoon and put it back in. Now, obviously, both of the last two versions can be dangerous, not only to the orca, but to the crew who would help move this animal. Being out of water for a lengthy period of time is never a good idea. It's always tough. I'm not saying this is not a good idea, but it's tough to get an orca and keep an orca alive. It's very stressful on the individual, very stressful on the people who are trying to bring it out, and anything can happen, and the risk just increase from there, and you don't want that to happen. So you have to be careful with all of that, and you have to manage all that. We just don't know what to do at this point, or the crew doesn't really know where they're going to go from there. There's, like I said before, there's indigenous people who are involved in this. Now, the indigenous people have a specific connection to these orcas. The orcas are a symbolism of their connection. And the stories by their ancestors is that the orca came onto land and the orca turned into a wolf. The wolf, it turns into their people. And so there's definitely a connection to their ancestors through there. And so it's very important culturally for the indigenous nations around there to be able to save this orca. Now, marine mammal experts are trying. They're working with Department of Fisheries and Oceans. They're working with veterinarians. It's a real smorgasbord of people trying to come together, experts trying to come together to figure out ways. It's just not a good scenario for this calf. Now, in terms of food, the calf has been seen hunting birds, playing around with birds. Unfortunately, birds are not what it needs to stay alive. It needs marine mammal meat. It needs seals. It needs sea lions, potentially, a small whale, like a fin whale or something like that the mother can grab. But it really can't. It usually won't eat fish. And it probably doesn't know how to hunt yet because it's too young, or hunt efficiently yet because it's too young. So there's still reason to believe that it's healthy. They've been monitoring the orca, the calf, and they're saying there can still be healthy. However, the clock is ticking, and the decision has to be made. I'm sure it's being discussed very, very carefully. But this is never an easy situation. It's a tragic situation where the orca mother died pregnant, and then leaving a calf behind with these orcas who, are not really in best shape as a population. You don't want to lose, 3 orcas when you've already lost 2. You don't want to lose an extra one. And of course, it's a calf. It's a baby. It's just a little one. It's a kid. It's a toddler. Well, I don't know how old it is, but it's not old, and you don't want this child to pass away. And so hopefully experts will be able to figure out something that is safe for both the orca and the crew that will be participating in this, and hopefully the transient family will be able to come by and pick up their calf and be able to raise it on their own. So that'll be an interesting story. I'll keep you updated once I find out more. But that's it for today's episode. Lots of news, obviously. We try to keep it compact in about less than 15 minutes. But again, if you want more news on orcas and other animals and other things that go on in the oceans, please sign up for our newsletter. Go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter, and it'll take you to a website. All you have to do is just put in your email address, and then you'll start getting it 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.